Hello and welcome back to another episode with me, Jess, and the lovely Yuwa Aghedo. Yuwa's a naturopath, nutritional therapist, herbalist, and lecturer. She also consults for Activated Probiotics, and she is an online private practice, but does a lot of work in personalized nutrition, lifestyle, and through a medicine approach to support women's health throughout the life course. But I guess, firstly, welcome to the show, and the best person to speak about it is, of course, herself, Yuwa. So, welcome.
Thank you so much, Jess. Thank you so much for the invitation, and it's a privilege to be here joining
Yeah,
you
so
all.
lovely to have you. And yeah, I've given you a brief introduction, but of course, it'd be lovely just to hear a bit about yourself, a bit about how you got into the field, and yeah, just a bit about you.
Okay, so I always find it like awkward talking about myself a little bit, but basically, I think everything with me is it's definitely about calling. That's
Mm.
really how I move and operate in life, and I've made an absolute choice for that from a very early age. So when I was younger, I really wanted to be in medicine, and then I realized it was mind-body medicine, both exploring psychology as an undergrad, and then traveled straight after university to Asia, as one does. So I discovered, or was introduced to, rather, I should say, rather than discover, I was introduced to Ayurvedic medicine in India.
Mm.
And had this wonderful experience in Kerala and Varkala, where they just do like lots of Ayurvedic beauty stuff, and it was just absolutely captivating for me.
Mm.
And then in Thailand, started doing some traditional medicine training over there, so traditional Thai massage, learning Thai herbal medicine from
Uh,
an older Thai guy, Mr.
mm.
Som, who we didn't even speak each other's language, but we got on really well. And then that just kind of progressed as I traveled. So then I had
Mm.
my first encounter in Australia, learning about, natural foods and continuing on the massage journey. And that eventually led to me retraining as a naturopath, going back to Australia and basing myself in Sydney and training as a
Mhm.
naturopathic medicine school over there. And everything has unfolded from that point.
Wow, that's so good. That's so interesting how you kind of discovered it more abroad and really found like your calling, so to say,
Yeah.
and really worked on it there. And so with the work you kind of do now, how do you kind of go through your work? So how do you say use those skills that you picked up to assess a client based on a particular life stage or personal history, or how do you kind of work with clients as they come to you?
Yeah, so the whole thing from, the naturopathic medicine approach is really very much based on very particular principles, and the principle
Yeah.
is always about nature. So we are natural medicine practitioners. So some of the, natural medicine doctors, that's the thing. And the approach is not just about the natural therapeutics we use, but it's the way that we look at the body and the way that we look at the person
Yeah.
within the context of their whole environment. And so every time it comes to assessing a person, it's always about where they're at right now, what their desires and their wants
Mm.
are, but also what the underlying cause of any dysfunction is. So that's really a fundamental principle of naturopathic medicine. And for myself, and I think particularly because of my background in psychology, I just love the dynamics around relationships. So I love exploring
Mm.
people's relationship to each other, to themselves, to their body, to each other, to their environment, and of course to
Yeah.
food. So I think there's a couple of things that are happening. So my focus is on women's health and throughout the different life stages. And so there are things that are generally present across the life stage. So you might see
Mm.
a younger woman, menstruating woman, there might be particular nutritional issues that are happening within that life stage. There might be particular life concerns, but then within that, there are all of these individual components that relates to that particular person at that point in time.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. I think that individual approach is so important as well, and really helps get to, as you said, the root of the issue. But do you kind of see any themes coming up with the women that you work with, with regards to the issues that they may be, yeah, they may be coming to you with or have?
Yes, there's a lot, and I really I really like exploring patterns. That's just something that my
Yeah.
mind is interested in, like looking at patterns and rhythms. And I think that any practitioner that's been in practice for a while sees that there's patterns of people that come to see you. So currently, I think that there's a lot of women in the perimenopause, or well, more so in the menopausal transition, and anxiety is pretty big there. So I see a lot of mental and emotional challenges arising at that point, probably more so than the physical challenges. Yes, sweat comes up as a regular thing, but mood is a big thing. Also, I think over the years, definitely I see overall a tendency towards more anxiety. So even when I'm looking at younger clients, I think over the last maybe like 5 or so years, I definitely see that there's a health anxiety alongside any presenting condition. And maybe that's because we have so much information, and a lot of information can sometimes create more confusion. And
Google can be your worst enemy.
Exactly. And then I think that, again, if you're assessing from a nutritional perspective, there's definitely common nutrients that you see tend to be lacking in people's diet. So I often see for B vitamin insufficiency, for example, particularly B1, and sometimes with folate and B12, but certainly B1, which I find it quite interesting that one comes up quite a lot with people. Or everybody knows, well, most practitioners know that magnesium again is a really, really, really common thing. And so when we're thinking about just even those 2 nutrients, B1 does quite a lot of things, but it's involved in energy metabolism. Magnesium also does a heck of a lot of things, but it's also involved in energy metabolism. And we're seeing these nutrients in insufficient amounts. And so I also see quite a lot of fatigue. And again, I think that's a very common, very general thing, that people are really quite a lot more anxious, and a lot more of their physical energy feeling less energized. And I absolutely love tracking and tracing energy, because in my mind, when you look at the physiology, anatomy and physiology, the body is a big energy making organism. So if we're not experiencing energy, if we don't feel energy, and our body, that's all that it knows what to do day in, day out, then that's a really interesting thing to explore. So that's that.
No, that's so interesting. You kind of briefly mentioned it with the kind of anxiety related issues that come to you. How do you kind of use your psychology background? Because you briefly mentioned that you've studied somewhat in psychology. How do you kind of use that and fuse that together with the nutritional side to really create that approach?
Yeah, so like with an undergrad course, you're not a qualified psychologist. It's a postgrad course before you have that. But after my undergrad, as a teenager, then I, as part of my naturopathy course, did lots of counselling. Within that, we had to do 2 years counselling within that. I've done lots of additional coaching courses. So it's really about, because there's one thing about having information, as I mentioned before, but my working theory is always to know, as in you have the information. To know and not to do is still not to know. So if you have information in your head, but you're not doing it, it's not in your body, it's not the actions that you're taking, then something is getting in the way there, and something there's a part of your being that doesn't actually know or value that information. And so I use like a range of different coaching techniques based on the person, what their goals are and what the obstacles are, to assist them. If they genuinely want that goal, then we move to that with a range of different coaching techniques.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting way to look at it and to kind of think about that. And how else would you say that you guide clients to make positive changes in their life? Because it obviously can be hard when someone comes to you with perhaps a range of issues, and then you're kind of want to help solve it with them. How do you guide them to make that positive change?
Yeah, so I don't know that there's like a formula for doing that. It's certainly about, everything starts by really being clear. I really love clear communication, and it's something that I work out a lot in my personal, my private life. And I think that actually, just as I often find a big thing that comes up with my clients is working on what actually truly, truly, truly is desired, what they really, really want. And also boundaries. Boundaries comes up a lot in terms of,
Oh, really?
yeah, I see that a lot, a lot, a lot, a lot. Just in terms of like, okay, so I want a particular goal, but then something happens and then that goal is relinquished and then something else happens. And it's like always kind of saying even saying one thing. So even taking time to actually identify what the goal is, but still almost like dropping the ball to go and do something else. And so one of the things I work, as I mentioned a lot, is just helping people to be clear. It's not my goal. It's not my responsibility to get that. It's like really, if this is something that you want, then it is actually your responsibility to first identify it and own it. I think oftentimes there can be a bit of a challenge with some women or with the clients that I see to actually just own their own desires. I definitely see that a lot. So I think that's always the first part, is like really be clear on what you want, clear communication to yourself, like really being genuinely honest to yourself. And then from that, then almost like putting a stake in the ground, and no matter what things come up that maybe make you run away from that goal. Obviously, if important things come up with your children, with your partner, with your work, that's an important thing to go and do. But I think when you're clear with boundaries, then it starts to become the case that not everything that calls you away warrants you being called away from actually focusing on and pursuing your goal. I hope that
no, that does. That's really, no, that's really empowering, I think, to really make sure. I think it's a lot of issues that people face is when they don't establish those set boundaries and know those limits for themselves. So say for the listeners, how would you encourage them, or how would you guide them to making sure that they stick to those boundaries and even just set them up? What kind of techniques would you use to help someone stick to their boundaries?
Well, I think just things like really prioritizing, like it's not like about list building or anything like that. I don't I do like lists and I do create lots of lists, but there's other ways there's other ways of kind of like organizing your time and scheduling things, and really simple techniques. Like I definitely love planning, and I think that suits my personality in my head, and also my desire for, I just like being really effective with my time. And so planning always comes into place with that. And so when it comes to the point where there's something that I'm going for, or for my family or professionally or whatever it is, then first, I think it's the recognition that it's not going to come instantly necessarily. Depending on the size of the goal, it's probably not going to come instantly. So there's a period of time between being aware and being clear that that's what I'm going for, and the time where it's going to be what I'm actually experiencing. And so planning throughout that is really, really important. And obviously, over periods of time, we're not automatons. So goals change a bit, plans change a bit, boundaries change a bit, but the general direction is what's set and what's clear. So I definitely think planning. So, really visualizing the end result and planning all the steps in between, well, not all the steps, but the big milestones between. And then also just structuring the day. So I think what I often hear people reflect to me is that, oh gosh, you do a lot of things. And like, because I guess I want a lot of things and I want to achieve a lot of things. And the only way that can happen is if I'm clear before today happens what I want to do for today.
Yeah.
And so I always think that like resources like time and money, they're going to go anyway. So your money's going to go, your time's going to go, your energy for the day, your mental energy for the day is going to go. So planning what you want to spend those things on is actually, I think, a really useful technique. It works for me, and it's oftentimes used with clients as well.
Yeah, I think that's really important as well, because I think people don't really, they're like, oh, I haven't got enough time to plan all this, but actually you can be so much more effective if you take those 10-15 minutes to plan your day. So it kind of works contrarily to what they think how it's going to work. So it's quite interesting.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good. UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also just working with who you are. So another thing that I really love, another field that I really love and I use a lot in terms of looking at rhythms and patterns is chronobiology and understanding, like, you know, we've all got these rhythms and cycles. The world has rhythms and cycles. Each year has rhythms and cycles, each month, each day, and we have rhythms and cycles. And so within that area, you can recognize, I know when my energy is ripe for particular times of work, and I know when it's, you know, great for socializing. And so I'm definitely a morning person, and I wake up and that's going to be my most effective time. It's going to be, you know, within the sort of early to middle part of the morning, and my least effective time is going to be in the evenings. And so I really just structure my day around that. So it's like work to be done in the, you know, early part of the day, generally speaking, and socializing. So I have a lot of social energy, but that needs to be done, you know, there's a particular time for that. And I think it's just not everybody has that same structure. So some people really, they switch on at 4 p.m. Others later on in the day. So I think working with who you are and where your energy naturally flows and managing that within the context of your life and work and family and other, you know, other commitments is, again, it just creates a little bit more ease to the whole thing.
Yeah, I completely agree. I was having that same conversation with my friends the other day, and I think, just people have different rhythms that they're used to and different ways of working even. And so you obviously do a lot of work in women's health. Do you encourage women to perhaps base different work commitments around their menstrual cycle, so to say? Because I've seen some stuff on that about different exercises to do in different stages of the menstrual cycle, or different ways to eat, or different ways in which you should perhaps do different working capabilities at different times. What do you kind of think on that cycle?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's been my jam for quite a number of years in terms of what I can to clients, because it's physiology. This is what's happening with biology, that actually one of the biggest messages I communicate is that we're really different across different times. And so if you look at a photo of yourself a year ago, you look different, or even a couple of years ago, you look different than you do now. We're different at different parts of our cycle, different, you know, and so I think that somehow takes a lot of time for people to realize that, oh, actually, and a bit different, you know. So we're different in the daytime than we are in the nighttime. We're different in the follicular phase than we are in the luteal phase. This is biology. So I think the amount of scope that someone has to adjust schedule depends on their work, and it depends on a range of things. But I think just actually highlighting that distinction, that the body is different at these different points in time, enables and empowers somebody to actually look at what they're doing and maybe make some different changes. If work can't change, then maybe it's about the socializing that maybe changes, that there's less physical activity in the latter part of the cycle.
For listeners that perhaps may not know the different stages or the different what recommendations for each stage, would you mind running really briefly through what things you could maybe recommend for each stage?
So just really, I think the simplest thing, like we could say that there are like 3 or 4 stages around the cycle, but the simplest one is just to say 2 phases. So from day 1 of the period until you ovulate is the first phase, the first half of the cycle. From ovulation to the day before your last period is the second half of the cycle. So the first phase is called the follicular phase. And this is when, you know, in fact, I don't really need to go into that biology, but this is generally the time, like around the time of the period. And I think most women know it. You don't, you know, sometimes people need a little bit more guidance to have that interoceptive awareness where they can actually acknowledge what it is that they're feeling. But, you know, most women know that you're a little bit particularly in the first day, maybe a little bit more tired, maybe needing to rest a bit more, maybe needing to eat a little bit more. Maybe there's a lot of cleansing that happens, as in, bodily, stuff coming out of your body during that time. And so it's a gentler period of time. And then as we go through, the days increase throughout that first half of the cycle, the follicular phase towards ovulation, then energy is building, building. So that would be the time that if you've got more socials, if you've got more, if you've got scope to manage your calendar, that you put more demanding things in that part of the cycle, that first phase. And then the big power part of our cycle is around ovulation. So, if you've got a regular 28-day cycle, and even if you don't have a regular 28-day cycle, even if it verges into 35 or it's lower, like 20, 24, 25, that's still considered to be a normal cycle. So we just use 28 is just the standard. But if you have a regular cycle, so the consistent days, so midpoint of that cycle is when you're ovulating, and that's always a point where we have a lot of power, a lot of social energy. So if you've got business deals going on, if you're out, if you're training, and that would be the time to do the big power, muscular building stuff around then. So it's a potent creative time. So throughout history, so looking at the cycles like this is not at all a new thing. I think it's wonderful that the information is coming out to more and more people, but it's not at all a new thing. This is what women have known throughout history, and there's been a lot of traditions where women are doing different things at different points of the cycle. So then the latter part of the cycle, post ovulation, is when we have like the waxing and the waning of the moon. So now, instead of energy being building up, it's starting to slowly, if particularly conception doesn't happen, it's starting to slowly come back in. So it's not immediate, but what normally you'd see, depending on, what else is going on with the cycle, and if there's no pathology, then normally you start to see the energy coming in, so more tiredness, needing to eat more. So during that latter part of the phase, it's characterized by higher progesterone, insulin receptivity changes, insulin response to foods changes, and the sugar cravings come in, the needing more food comes in, the needing to be, cozy and warm at home. So maybe that's not the part of the cycle where we book lots of new meetings, new challenges, so really simply put, I think first half, like the moon, first half building up, you can do more. Middle, do the most, and then the latter half start winding things down. And I think it's a really simple way to just, I think first and foremost, just observe yourself, just observe how your energy is, because if there's a lot of frustration coming up, and it's a frustration and you see it at the latter part of the cycle, so premenstrual syndrome, and there's, lots of emotional frustration, maybe there just needs to be a little bit less on the plate so that your energy can do what it needs to do and be calm and nestle in at home, rather than being asked to do more than it.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's really helpful. I think it's also, as you said, you touched on a really key point. It's not something that we don't already know as women. I think it's just something we need to listen to in our own bodies, and not expect to say be like men and work the same level each day. I mean, they obviously have cycles as well, but I think really just tailoring your work and your life, nutrition, exercise around your cycle is a really easy way that you can kind of biohack your own life. And I think it's just a case of encouraging, instead of just ignoring it and pretending it's not happening and carrying on as normal every day, recognizing that you can have different energy levels, etc., on different days. So I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, and I think it's exactly as you said. And I just think that sometimes we need to be given permission to know what we know. It's as simple as that. It's like we all know it, but it's like now it's okay to know it. Now it's okay to act on that knowing as well.
And also cut yourself a bit of slack. I think it's the case of, I'm actually not going to be feeling very energetic today, and that's okay, because later on I will feel more energetic. So I think it's giving yourself that, listening to yourself and kind of giving yourself that self-love is so important. And kind of related to that, how do you kind of support these changes that you make with your clients from moving from the short term to the long term?
That's a really good question. Um, I think again, it depends on like, really just starting off and having clients, assisting clients to actually set their goals. So
Yeah.
if, for example, so if somebody comes to me and there's a chronic condition that they're facing. So yesterday I did a practitioner case study presentation on a client with Hashimoto's thyroiditis. So it's an autoimmune condition that affects the thyroid, so low thyroid function. Something like that is not autoimmune conditions, is not a short-term thing. It's not a thing that you concentrate on for a week, a month, and then forget about it. This is a lifetime condition, and it can be managed most definitely, but it's a lifetime condition. And so I think depending on what's presented, then it's really just giving that person the information to acknowledge that either the condition is a lifelong condition, or, for example, if somebody presents and they have metabolic syndrome, or they present with type 2 diabetes or cardiovascular disease or something like that, that these conditions didn't take a day or a month or even a year to manifest. These are, it's been a long-term progression into dysfunction before something like that expresses. And so similarly, as it took a really long time before the body got into that level of dysfunction, it will take a while for the body to come out of, depending on, the gravity. It'll take a period of time for the body to rebalance itself. And I'm not saying that everybody comes out of those pathological states. So I think it's always about, as I mentioned, I really like clear communication. I'm hoping I'm being clear today. I'm not sure.
No, you are.
But I think just in terms of just clearly communicating things to clients. So, our role as practitioners is that we go into all of the biochemistry, all the anatomy and physiology, all of the research, and it's just about communicating, distilling, that information in a really simple way that people just go, you know what, this is my body, this is my health, this is my life. And when people talk about self-care and they use it as an end point, it's all about self-care, it's all about me. I actually really don't agree with that at all. I think that self-care isn't an end point. It's the sort of taking off point to care about everything else in your life much better. So if you really love your partner and your children, your family, and you really want to do the best in your work and to be present, to be able to serve your community and everything around that, then to be able to show up in those places really well, then we need to be really well. And so I kind of like I guess it's about just helping people recognize that by taking time to get their body right, to get their nutrition right, to feel as good as they can feel within themselves, it actually does facilitate them showing up more loving, more patient, more energized, more present in all of those other aspects of their life. And I think that's one of the reasons I really love this field, one of the many reasons, because I just think it has such a profound effect on, yes, the physical body to start, yes, the mind body, but also everything in your life. And I think that helping people get that really assists them to have the buy-in to just change things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's such a lovely way of putting it as well. I couldn't agree more. We all know that when we're really tired and when we're really hungry, say, for example, we're not our best selves and we're probably not very pleasant to be around. So I think taking it to understanding that if we're not getting the right nutrients, if we're not taking care of ourselves in that way, we're not going to be, as you said, be able to show up for the rest of the people around us. So I think that's actually, such a nice way of putting it.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good. UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
Thank you, Jess. Yeah, it's such a fascinating field. So I work with a company, Activated Probiotics, and they're a practitioner-only microbiome company or probiotic company that specialize in strain-specific product formulations.
Yeah.
And so that basically is reflecting the research that has really moved away from this general use of the term probiotics to mean something like a random thing that we use for all different kinds of ailments, to actually recognizing that there are specific characteristics of bacteria that have very beneficial, have been shown by the research to have very beneficial effects. So as I mentioned earlier, in terms of the patterns that I see in my client base, when I'm seeing anxiety, for example, and particularly in this postmenopausal or perimenopausal client group, then using some specific strains of bacteria can really support the whole gut-brain axis. And the particular product that I like using from Activated Probiotics is called Biome Lift. And this has been shown in clinically, a clinical trial has been shown, it's been published in a really well-respected journal of Frontiers of Psychiatry, and it's been shown to increase or improve mood and increase sleep and, a range of different outcomes associated with mental and cognitive health. So mood, I use that for clients if they're having issues with mood and sleep, not as a standalone product, but all part of this kind of a therapeutic program that would include, nutrients, as I mentioned, such as magnesium and potentially herbs as well. So it really forms a really nice part of that therapeutic plan. And also the female microbiome is also a big one. So obviously with Screen Me, that's what you guys do a lot of. So looking at products again particularly within this postmenopausal group, so things that support the vaginal microbiome, where there's a tendency for irritation or recurrent cystitis, urinary tract infections. So really supporting the microbiome in that area can be really beneficial.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I so agree. I think there's so much white noise at the moment with regards to the microbiome and things. So it's so nice to kind of see you work with people with activated probiotics, where you kind of look at each strain individually and all the clinical trials as well, just actually evidencing it. So I think that's really important to work with your clients on that front. And as you said before, it kind of goes back to what you were saying about how the gut is so important in that healing process of the whole body. And I think, rebalancing that is so important.
Absolutely.
And have you seen that in your clients kind of have effect?
Pardon me, say that to me again.
Have you kind of seen that work with your clients, like have an effect? Like, how do your clients? That's really interesting. That it can improve your mood, improve your microbiome. Yeah, it's so interesting.
Yeah, so I think that in terms of, we were talking before about the life stages and the life course of women. I think actually looking at the different microbiomes throughout, there isn't like strong evidence around it shifting so much with the different life stages, but definitely there are some products I'd use in, for women. I work a lot with couples with fertility, preconception care. So there'll be products that we'd use in terms of supporting the microbiome preconceptionally into early infancy of the baby, and then later on in the life cycle, if I'm using, actually I don't see that many children, but looking at early puberty, so early menstruation. So sometimes there's a particular product that I use that supports iron absorption. And I've seen that to be very clinically, very, very effective, where iron can be, really irritating for lots of people's digestive systems. This particular probiotic formulation can really support iron absorption for, teenage girls that are starting to menstruate. And I've also seen with the two products that I mentioned before, the Biome Lift really supporting the nervous system in postmenopausal women. Just lots of my clients are actually showing very good progress on.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like that fits so well with what you were saying about listening to your body as well. I think kind of choosing, say, the right probiotic strain for yourself according to what you need. I think that aligns so well. And it's all about, it kind of matches, basically everything you've been saying about listening to your body and adapting accordingly and really just changing, making those little changes that I think is so important.
Absolutely. And also just getting finding really well-informed, trusted sources of information. I think that's a big thing as well. And just trusting yourself with good quality information to support you. Otherwise, it feels, again, like another big area to go into. But actually, there are lots of people who this is their work and they have good intentions. And so you can find good resources just to support.
Agreed. And I couldn't agree more, particularly with the whole clinical trial backing and things like that. I think everyone's gone through a phase of going on Google and being like, I'm dying, I can't. But I think, having that reputable name, I think behind, or speaking to someone that basically knows what they're doing is obviously so important. And I'm sure you'll have many people getting in contact with you following this.
That would be great. Thanks, Jess.
And I think that draws us towards the end of our podcast, but I think that was such an interesting way to end. And if you had any other closing comments or anything else you would like to say, of course, all your socials will be attached below. But if there was, anything else that you wanted to mention at all.
Yeah, so I guess the simplest thing would be that I know that sometimes, just from the work that I do, both in outside of the practitioner space, but work I do in corporate presentations or just chatting to people socially, I hear this kind of limitation, I think, in people's perspectives around what nutrition can do for them. So definitely people are on board with nutrition if they want to change their body composition, they want to get fitter or they want to get slimmer or something like that, then it's about nutrition. But I'd really just like to close with saying that actually exploring nutritional lifestyle literally facilitates every single aspect of your life, every single aspect that relates to you as a human being. So if you want to be better at work or this or whatever your goals are, there's a component that nutrition can play in that. And in some areas it's a really big component, in other areas it's a small one. But I would just definitely encourage people to really tune up with that. And alongside that, I do have to mention the microbiome. When we're exploring health and our nutritional status, gone is the time that we can just think about nourishing our human cells. We do also have to think about how is it that we're going to nourish and support a healthy flourishing of these microbial cells that live in and on us. And so those two things, whatever it is that we're doing, we're just kind of operating within that perspective of supporting those aspects.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think it's an opportunity that we get every single day to adapt that and to change it. So it's not something that's super far-fetched that you've got to build up towards trying to do a massive life change. It's something that you can do every day. Every day is a new day. You have a new opportunity to even just make the slightest change. And I think it's small and manageable. And I think you can really progress and really see the changes. So I couldn't agree more on that front.
Absolutely.
But,
wonderful.
But thank you so much for coming and being on the podcast. And I think, it'll be super, super interesting for our community. So I just want to say thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jess. Thank you all for listening. And I wish you all the best.